Yeah, hey now, PSW staff, clients, friends joining us for Tuesday, Classical Tuesday. You know the drill. Usually we look at a classical composer on Tuesdays. Yesterday we looked at Jason and the Argonauts, your film scoring assignment. So get that into me by today. We'll see the results for Friday. Instead of focusing on the battle, I really want to focus on the pre-battle, the pre-war of those creepy skeletons coming up. So I know it's going to be, so make it kind of scary, creepy. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll see it on Friday. Today we'll talk about a composer that I've been wanting to get to. There's no shortage of great composers, and this guy's. I know the name. I don't really know that much of his work because, although I was trained in piano, I never played his pieces because I wasn't good enough to. So he was known to be probably the greatest piano player that ever lived. And I'm sure Rex will enjoy this too, hearing this class. So today we're going to be talking about the Hungarian composer, Franz Liszt. So pianist, conductor, music teacher, very influential teacher as well, arranger, organist of the Romantic era. We know all about the Romantic era. What century is that? 19th century, right? That's when Romantic music was flourishing. So he was, he wrote for the piano, but also wrote a lot for the orchestra and other ensembles, but probably best known for his piano music. And also, we're going to take a look at, I think he was the first rock star. There was something called Listomania, not WrestleMania, Listomania, that was coined when he was performing because he did some very innovative things. So we'll do a rundown of his life. We're going to listen and watch some beautiful performances. Then we'll talk about a few things that he really developed, kind of not invented, started in. He was doing things other composers weren't doing, so he really elevated us into the 20th century modernism. So it's just going to be a terrific class. I think it's going to be very fun. So let's get into Listomania. So he's born in 1811, dies in 1886. So let's bring up our timeline because he's born just a year after Frédéric Chopin, the Polish composer. So born almost the same time as one of the greatest piano composers ever. And they both got a lot of their fame in Paris. So, they knew each other. Perhaps they were rivals or jealous of. Their music sounds different. We'll talk about that. But he's born, right around that same era. He's also going to. So Wagner's going to be influential. They're going to be friends. So this is, it's pretty much he's born during the whole 19th century, the whole Romantic period. Let's go from Italy where we were looking at Jason and the Argonauts, and let's go to the Austrian Empire. His dad was a musician, Adam, piano, violin, cello, guitar, and he knew Beethoven, his dad, and he also knew Haydn as well. So he begins teaching little Franz, at 7, and begins composing music when he's 8. And by the time he's 9, he's giving concerts, he worked very, very hard. So although he was a genius, he did actually work really hard. Studied piano with a pupil of Beethoven, so somebody that Beethoven taught, and then composition with Salieri, who is depicted in Amadeus the movie, but was also a great composer in his own right. He was the music director of the Viennese court, so he studies under him. So pretty good teachers, right? And after his father's death, goes to Paris. He was determined to become a great virtuoso piano player after hearing Paganini. Paganini was a very famous violinist and after hearing Paganini in Paris, he said, okay, I want to be a virtuoso on the piano. And some people talk about his very interesting aspects of his technical achievements that are crazy. They call it the three-hand effect, and obviously he doesn't have three hands, but it's almost like he's playing with a third hand, because his hands can stretch so far, and he would practice all the time on getting them to stretch even further. Now, he didn't go quite as far as Schumann. We haven't looked at Schumann yet. We will do a class on him, and he was a composer, mostly piano music as well. Schumann actually split his thumb so they could stretch further, which was not a smart idea, and I don't know how. I think he was crazy, but Liszt did not do that. What Chopin did influence Liszt in was his romantic side, romantic composition, because Chopin, of course, is very romantic. We looked at all of his pieces, so he did kind of soften Liszt, and Liszt's creative output really explodes in the 1830s. So during the 1830s, he tours all over Europe. He would perform 3-4 times a week and give concerts, and they said that he probably performed well over 1,000 times just during this 8-year period. And much like rock stars, you do shows, you travel, and that's how you get famous a lot of times, or bands, and was making so much money as a performer. He gave away most of his money to charity and humanitarian causes throughout his whole life. He was very charitable, and mostly all of his performing fees went to charity after 1857, which is kind of cool. So people have dubbed Liszt as the history's first rock star, because during the 1830s, with all this touring, he's also creating recitals. People did not do recitals before, in the sense of a guy coming out on the piano, playing all of the music in his head. He didn't bring out sheet music, and people thought that was arrogant and stupid or whatever. So he'd come out, play pieces that he had written, but also play arrangements that he had made of Bach and Beethoven and Wagner's music. So this is what we call, a recital today, but nobody had ever done that before Liszt. And he was able to hold an audience, a captive audience, so much so that women went crazy for her. He had this long hair, he was very handsome, and he had all these expressions on his face while he was playing, and this angered a lot of people, because this was very atypical for a performer of serious classical music to go out on stage and woo an audience and woo a lot of the females' audiences. I mean, women would almost attack him after concerts. It was very hard. They would tear bits of his clothing, fight over broken piano strings, because he would play it so hard, just like a guitar breaks a string. Some of the piano strings would break too, and they would take locks of his hair, and nobody had seen anything like this. This was crazy until a German poet coined it, Listomania, because that's how out of control it was. So at the height of his powers, he kind of retires from performing around age 35, and in Weimar in Germany, he really starts writing music more and performing more, and the next 12 years produces orchestral scores, choral pieces, and becomes more, into music composition. He also helps a lot of composer friends because he knows everybody, and he helps friends like Wagner. And Wagner actually ended up marrying his daughter, Cosimo. People think that he traveled at least 4,000 miles a year, though, during his touring. After writing, he got back into, playing music and touring. He's credited with a few different things. Also, creating this symphonic poem. We've talked about a tone poem, which is, one long movement, and that's pretty much like a symphonic poem. He's one of the founder. He creates this. So this is not a symphony. A symphony has different movements, right? Like we've seen. This is one long movement, and usually is evokes something. They call it a poem because it evokes, sometimes it's inspired by a short story or a poem or a painting. That's what Liszt starts doing. And he starts doing this new thing called program music, which is music intended to get you to think, the audience members to think of, oh, I see landscapes, I see all of these other things, to evoke things in the audience, as opposed to the opposite is absolute music, which is supposed to just be music, music standing for itself. And if we know of the Romantic period, we know it's mostly romantic, meaning it sounds pleasant. It's very, it's mostly major, minor triads and chords and stuff like that. He's going to, by the late 19th century, he's going to be one of the first to do more dissonance in music. This is good. I know some of you are well, this dissonance is not good, but this is good. Too much dissonance is a little bit hard to swallow. A little dissonance is like a little spice. It makes it a little bit more interesting sometimes. So he introduces more dissonance, and he also introduces more augmented triads. Augmented means to make it, to augment something means to raise it a little bit. I mean, if you just take a C major triad, usually you augment the fifth, and so the fifth is G, right? So an augmented C augmented chord is G sharp. So you get this sound instead of just a triad. You get this sound, and it becomes a whole different sound. Probably the most famous, so many famous pieces. My favorite, The Fountains of the Via d'Este, composed in 1877. This is not way before, but this is before Debussy and Ravel. I mean, listen to how much this sounds like early Impressionism music that's coming in the late 19th century. So he's doing this before Debussy and Ravel. I mean, this sounds just like a piece that one of them could have written, and he was friends with Debussy, and I think Debussy was very influenced by that. So he was really ahead of his time during this time. So he dies in Beirut, Germany, at the age of 74 from pneumonia. Lives a pretty long life in 1886. Just a genius composer, and now we know the first rock star. It wasn't Jimi Hendrix, it wasn't Elvis Presley, it was Franz Liszt. There was Listomania. He just went up there and said, I'm going to give these piano concerts. Long before Elton John would fill stadiums, he would fill concert halls and play. I mean, you can just, from what we're hearing and listening and seeing these performers do this, it was spectacular. And he would practice 5-6 hours a day. So he worked really hard at this. So I hope you enjoyed Liszt. I'm glad we finally got to him. I mean, a genius, to say the least. Yeah, so That's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Can't wait. We got something special planned. And have a great day. Make it a great day. Okay, love you. See you tomorrow. Bye.